This is a picture of the ancient kingdom of David that we're going to be visiting shortly. It's where the kingdom of David was located. Much of the valley has been filled in by rubble coming down from the temple, from where the temple existed, and down in the valley where that minibus is the source of water. This is the village of Silwan, S-I-L-W-A-N, which is an Arab village. And here is the Mount of Olives with all of the graves, some of which date back 2,000 years. You can see two holes into the bedrock, which I'm zeroing right now. These were the way the common people buried their dead. They would dig a hole into the bedrock and put the bodies inside, and that could go back. See the rubble, which is the exterior of the original wall of the city of David. And Warren's shaft was a shaft that was dug immediately below this structure, going down vertically, and then they built it under the wall horizontally to come to the location of the water source. Here's an inscription and a description of what we're going to see. What's that?
It's an ancient toilet seat. You see the hole? That's exactly what it is.
Is that right?
I've never seen that.
Ancient toilet seat.
Okay. Now looking at the inscription to be found in area G. Dates back to about 2,500 years ago. It was part of the city of David, or possibly Solomon, who was the son of David. And this was the original Jerusalem. This, together with the Temple Mount, which was built up above. The rock which you presently see was part of a retaining wall or a supporting wall, which may have supported a palace on its top. The city of David, and probably was built by the Canaanites. And this object which you see is an early toilet seat. This structure originally was a two-story house. Israelite house, because pottery shards were found with the Jewish name inscribed on the pottery. Known as Ahiel's house, A-H. Enter Warren's shaft. We've now walked all the way down below the old city wall. This shaft went back more than 3,000 years, and it was wide enough so that people could be walking down while others were walking up. Lower down buckets all the way down to the source of the water, and haul it up, and then carry it up the slope under the wall back to the city, the Canaanite city, prior to the of what we have just passed through. That would be inside the city wall, and then the shaft would lead under the wall all the way down to the source of the water. Hear the muezzin calling the Muslims to prayer. The spot on which I stood was occupied by the Jordanians, and this was known as Ammunition Hill. In 1967, the Israelis came up from Tel Aviv, and they captured the far distant hill known as Radar Hill, which previously had been used by the British for communications. Then they came across the skyline to where the prophet Samuel had been buried 2,000 years ago, and continued on. None of these buildings existed, of course, until they came approximately to this area, upon which the Jordanians had erected the anti-tank barricades. None of the trees were here, none of these buildings were here, and the Israelis had to fight their way up these steep hills on foot. The top of the hills, they then had to fight in the trenches, and this is where most of the fatalities occurred. As you can see, the trenches are very, very narrow, and there were constant little dugouts on the side of the trenches in which the Jordanians were holed up waiting for the Israelis. Been captured. The rest of the fighting was not as difficult because the Muslims in the Arab quarter of Jerusalem recognized that after Ammunition Hill fell,
in honor of the occasion of having our Canadian president, actually the president, our Canadian president of our Canadian friends, Mr. Harvey Hector here, we having a special Suda on the occasion of the Yom. And I'd like to call upon the Rosh Yeshiva Rabbi Noach Weinberg to say a few words.
Here we are, this day of celebration of the creating of the State of Israel. More, we have to focus, you see, on that day. If we were here that day when they created this state, the British were sure that we would plead with them to stay. They were sure. Can't imagine what it meant for people who are coming from the displaced persons camps in Europe and sent straight out to the front. They didn't even understand Hebrew. Russia, United States, Syria, Morocco, we're here. We're Jews. We recognize each other as Jews, as brothers. There was no European. Nobody left this country. I have a friend who had a first cousin who was a high army officer. It was up there in the army ranks. My friend was Rabbi Feldman. And he said to his cousin, you know, everybody was waiting with bated breath. What's going to be with the Jewish people? We were afraid the Jewish people were going down a drain. The fact is that the foreign citizens in Israel were all evacuated. The United States sent the Navy to Haifa to evacuate American citizens. My wife's uncle, Irving Bunim, had clout in the American government. So he got the embassy to send a limousine to Kiryat Sanz to pick us up, to take us to Haifa to get us out of this country. To save his nephew, nieces, you know, my children. I asked my wife if she wanted to go, and she said, no, sir. No, because all the Jewish people. But the opportunity the Almighty gave us, we've got to believe in this miracle. We've got to believe it. It's happened once, when the Jewish people was threatened. It happened. We've got to make it happen again. In order to survive. In order to survive in 100 different ways. Those who understand this and who appreciate this goal will find that they themselves are drawn very tightly together. Thinking in the terms of the Jewish people, fighting for them, comrades in arms, that would give you a brotherhood and a closeness that you cannot achieve in any other way. On this occasion, I want to say that over the few years that we had a comrade in arms who, you already told you, has made us in Toronto a branch, president of our branch in Toronto that took us from what? We were a little, with the same ideal, that concept of the brotherhood of the Jewish people, of survival, of getting our children back. And with that concept, and with working together, we've done miracles in Toronto. Is that true? Miracles. Never believed it could be done. I'll tell you a little story. When we started the branch in Toronto, there was a gentleman who got us our tax. He was a wonderful man. He helped us, he supported us, he gave us a lot of money. And when we decided to send our 5-man team to Toronto, he was instrumental in getting us the introduction and the first funds. After that, he came back to me, back here in Israel, and he said to me, I don't want to mention his name, but he said to me, you know who I'm talking about? He said to me, Rabbi Weinberg, he said, don't send them. I said, why not? What's the matter? They'll get killed. They'll be wiped out. They don't want them. They'll ostracize them. You can't do it. Don't send them. I said, well, you know, these young people have confidence. They'll win. They'll do it. They'll get the job done. I mean, you know, believe in them. He said, no. It would take more than a miracle. It would take more than a miracle. He said, don't do it. He said, look, you know I've helped you. You know I've backed you. I will help you. I will back you. But if you do it, I am off your board. I will not back you. You cannot count on me. Never again. I don't want to see you. He said, no, let's talk about it. No, sir. He quit, finished. We sent our team there, and he never showed up again. Until a year ago. He walked into my office, and he said, you were right. I told him we'd get a miracle like Harvey. He said, you were right. I was wrong. I came to apologize. I don't know how it happened, but they did the job. It's unbelievable. It's a miracle. But working together and doing that job has made us very close. And we're looking forward that we'll be able to get a lot more people into that concept of that unity, of that oneness, that we are, we really are. The world looks at us that way. We've got to understand we are that. We are one. And we've got to live as one, got to understand each other, we've got to work together.
To also welcome Mrs. Hecker. Did I make the same mistake last year? May have, but maybe next year I won't. Because as we all know, anybody who's married is that to make an accomplishment in life, it takes two. And whereas the husband or the wife may be the president, but it still takes both to allow the other to give her the support. So I also want to welcome Mrs. Hecker. I also want to call upon Mr. Harvey Hecker, President of Canadian Friends, to...
Thank you. My wife and I are delighted to be here again. We were here last in May of last year to give you a progress report of our Toronto branch. Some of you may not have been here, and for the benefit of those, I'll pick up perhaps where Rev Noah left off. He sent out 5 young men with stars in their eyes and full of confidence to the city of Toronto, where the financial patron who originally had encouraged them had second thoughts, where he foretold difficulties and problems, and guess what? He was right. They met the difficulties, they had them, they suffered from them, they encountered adversity,
They encountered resentment, they encountered difficulties, they encountered problems. But what the patron neglected to take into consideration was the integrity and strength of character of the young people who came from Aish, or from here, from Jerusalem, from the soundness of their convictions, from the support that they received from Reb Noach, and they struggled. What does struggling mean? They were sent to be educators. They became much more. They had to be not only educators, but fundraisers. Each week and every week. If there wasn't money that they raised, there were only two sources, their own efforts and Jerusalem. And indeed, in those early days, Jerusalem had to send money as badly as Jerusalem needed it for itself. And they had to go out and knock on doors themselves. And at the same time, they were caretakers. They had to look after their own facilities. And they had to teach. And they had to recruit. And they had to attract. And they had to explain spiritual and religious needs, not only of themselves, but also their families. These young men struggled and conquered. The objective which they set for themselves has the same theme that we're celebrating today in this country, and that's independence. And you might ask, how is independence related to what we at Aish are doing? There's a very strong relationship. We want to help young people back to understand their roots. We want them to make choices. In order to be independent, you have to be free to make a choice. In order to make a choice, you must know from which you can choose. Unfortunately, the world in which we live has not made those alternatives clear. Instead, what we have to choose from is the way of life that we presently have and the way of life that is brought forward to young people of college age on campus a dozen different ways. You want a God? We'll give you a God. You want two gods? We've got two gods. You want no gods? We've got no gods. You want a stone to worship? What color and how big? But to make a choice that's meaningful, you have to know what the alternative is in Judaism. And that's what Aish is all about. We want to bring young people back so that they can learn to make a choice that's intelligent, so that they can make a choice with knowledge. Because without that knowledge, there is no choice, and without choice, there is no independence. What is Aish about? It's about independence. It's about what we're celebrating today, except what we celebrate in this country is a physical independence, a geographical independence, and what Aish brings is a spiritual independence and an intellectual independence. In Toronto, I'm pleased to say that the last 12 months have brought more successes, and we measure success by a very pragmatic yardstick. Numbers, people. We set out to adopt a new program and to approach a new marketplace. As an accountant, as a businessman, I use business terms. We're going to broaden our market from the college-age youth to the young marrieds. This is a new market and a very important one, a meaningful one. As Reb Noach points out very properly, this market consists of young people who know who they are in the physical world, who know what they want to accomplish in the physical world, who understand what their goals are in the material world in which they live, who can be role models to our college-age kids, and who are yearning and looking for information about the spiritual world. It's not enough for them to make money, and it's not enough for them to be successful in a profession and a career. It was intended to culminate in the formation of 10 groups of adults who would meet in their homes and alternate. Each group would consist of approximately 10 to 20 young married people. And it was anticipated that it would take us from the launching of the program where Reb Noach spoke in February in Toronto until September. I'm delighted to tell you that we don't have to wait until September. All 10 groups have been formed and are operating now. Our other programs continue. Our Elie Wiesel fundraising program was once again a smashing success. We filled one of the largest shuls in Toronto with approximately 2,500 to 3,000 people who came to hear Elie Wiesel talk. Elie Wiesel has now spoken 3 times in Toronto and once in Los Angeles. And at the beginning he spoke of learning for learning's sake, and now is speaking of learning for the sake of spirituality. Our Aleinu program, Discovery program, is off and running. Our Shabbat program is new. It is an opportunity to invite, for observant families, to invite people who are not quite as certain of who they are and what they want to be, to spend a Shabbat, to have 3 meals with the family as guests of the family, and to be exposed to their peers in age and in background as to what the pleasures of a family Shabbat can mean. Because regrettably, that's something that our society has managed to obliterate for people who are not observant. The joys of the family gathering on a Shabbat and of spending time together is something that has escaped us. Of the Toronto branch. Los Angeles has its hands full in assisting Jerusalem and in expanding within its own territory, and the challenge and the torch was thrown to the Toronto branch. The fellowships would either survive through our own efforts, or it would not exist this year. Baruch Rabinowitz, one of the original Fry, together with Shalom Schwartz, who's the executive director in Toronto, and Aaron Hock, all felt very strongly about the desirability of continuing the program because of the quality of the people that had been introduced to Toronto through it last year. And we went ahead with no assurance that the money would be found, and indeed we ran to the last critical date. We borrowed the seed money from the bank that would give us enough breathing room to see whether or not we could run the program. And we had a cutoff date, sink or swim. That was as much money as we had. It was going to carry us until March 15th. If we didn't have the program, if we did not have the funding, by March 15th, the program was not going to run. And several days before March 15th, we squeaked through, and we have the funding. And those of you who are here several weeks from now will have an opportunity of meeting the 40 young people that are going to be coming from North America to spend 5.5 weeks here. Tell you next year of how successfully. Thank you.
Now standing at the front of Dan Bovley's home, which is situated on a half-acre of land. It's just several days after Yom Ha'atzmaut, and as a result you can see that he has flags decorating the house. The property is quite attractive, particularly the grounds, which are completely surrounded by shrubs and trees. Proprietor himself, Dan Bovley, the managing partner of Bovley Milner in Israel. Dan, say a few words to the camera.
How
how can I say words that are worthy of your camera?
Now,
Eating because the meat will be too cold.
we are about to have lunch here
Don't
in
worry
the
about-
entrance to Jerusalem, and I'm just going to give you a view of the scene before you enter the city, and in particular some of the outlying suburbs and the breathtaking scenery that surrounds this city on 360 degrees. In the distance is the small area where our niece and nephew Susie and Mark view from a guest house on the kibbutz called Beit Oren. We're high up in the Carmel Mountains, looking towards the sea in this direction. The kibbutz has the tennis courts and the swimming pool. There is Sheila walking towards me with Maya. This is the tower of Haifa University. The other buildings are low-rise, but this one particular building stands on the brow of the hill. It overlooks the valley where Haifa is located, and in the haze and the mist you can see the sea. A power station down below and a cement factory that's contributing to the pollution. And Haifa itself is around this bend. You can see some of the tall towers of the city, or the hotels and the archaeological digs and park of Beit She'arim. People are picnicking in the gardens, and there were excavations here that have reached back into 2,000 years of... Here's Mark and Maya and Sheila and Susie. She's going to make some music for her auntie. Very good. There she is. That's a good girl. Look over here. This is a description of what we're going to see.
Entry CE, it was the seat of the Sanhedrin and the dwelling place of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, compiler of the Mishnah. Its underground cemetery, catacombs cut in the hillside, was the most important burial center for the Jews of Israel and the diaspora during the Talmudic period. The archaeological excavations of Beit She'arim were carried out from 1936 to 1940 and between 1953 and 1958 by the Israel Exploration Society. Excavations brought to light the ruins of its synagogue, public buildings, relics of local industry, and extraordinarily well-preserved catacombs whose walls contain drawings and numerous inscriptions.
2nd century catacomb in which wealthy people would be buried. Here from all over the neighboring district, and build these very costly sarcophagi for their burial of a major casket that has very intricate carving on it inside the cave that we've just been. This is a burial ground of one of the rabbis that's referred to in the Haggadah, Rabbi Gamliel.
Flower. Pick up the flower. Oh no.
Synagogue just outside of Beit She'arim. The size of the stones that were used to build this synagogue, many rooms in it. And I wanted to show you some of the very beautiful scenery that we have, and some of the very beautiful homes that are built Israel is a terribly green country, but in this part of the country there is more rainfall, and obviously example of the beautiful green countryside as we travel along towards Haifa. The pool area of the guest home that we're staying in at the kibbutz. It's a very beautiful, and they have a number of other facilities also, including playgrounds, tennis courts, basketball, and you can see the motel itself up. About to go into the water at the pool. Maya, hi. Here are the children in a swing. Marani has just come. Hi, Marani. Druze village, just close by the kibbutz where we were at. There's a very modern area with magnificent homes in the suburb. That's a high school, I believe, that we're looking at right now. Druze village, way off in the distance.
Little boxes with the stones on just below the terrace.
Yeah.
Those are beehives.
A Druze village, and you can see the flag that's still flying from Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's market day. From all neighborhoods do their shopping. A motley crew walking toward me in a Druze village. And again, it's the same market town with all of the shops open. And you can see the display of merchandise out in the street.
At 5 years old, she's going to be smarter than me.
Coming back to the same, the Ein Hod Artists Village, not far from the guest house, not far from Haifa. And here you can see the end of the plain with the sea in the distance. And this is a view from the road entering into the village of Ein Hod. This camera only takes pictures and sound, but doesn't take the smell. There's a wonderful aroma of lamb being cooked at the restaurant. It's inside one of the art galleries. What I'd particularly like you to see is the view that these people have in their home, which is above this building, looking out over the valley. An Adam and Eve done in ceramic. A museum dedicated to the art of the founder of the Dada movement, Marcel Janco. We're standing on the balcony overlooking the valley with the sea in the distance. And this will give you a good idea of what that plain looks like. And so I'll try and bring it up close so we can get a better look at it. It's right on the sea on a bit of observe down the coastal road. And we've just come across a small herd of goats within the preserve that are being herded by two Arab boys from a nearby village. I'm now taking a shot from the swimming pool level of our hotel just outside of Nice, where we landed this morning, May 29th. We're staying at a hotel called La Réserve de Beaulieu, which is in the town of Beaulieu-sur-Mer, perhaps a half-hour drive north of the airport. This is the hotel where Sheila and I spent an evening, 15 or 16 years ago, and had a marvelous dinner. The hills are spectacular, and some of the homes up there are absolutely phenomenal. They're mansions. We propose to go driving up in that area. Dining room of La Réserve, and as you can see on the other side are the windows showing off the sea, and the interior court is a garden. It's an old hotel, but very gracious. And the last room up there is a spectacular view returning from Italy back towards Monaco and into France. The scenery has been absolutely spectacular. As EZE on the Moyenne Corniche on our way to Nice from Monaco. This is Nice. We're far up on the top of the hill, and you can have a view of the entire city with the sea in the distance. The city's wrapped around, right out back there. Everything with orange roofs, basking in the sunshine. The beach at Nice. And as you can see, it's a pebbly beach. With hotels all the way along one side, the Promenade des Anglaises, and the beach on the other side on the sea. What they call a private beach with cots and a restaurant, and this is the public beach. When you park illegally in Nice, you get towed away. This second car was lifted up bodily by the parking attendants and put on the ramp. This is the Citadel. It dates back to about the 15th century and guarded the harbor. Prince Way over a drawbridge. 31st, and we're in the town of Castellana in France. We've just left Nice, and we're on our way to our first stop. The next town is going to be Digne, but what we would like you to see in particular is this huge 600-foot rock that goes straight up with a chapel on top of it. Napoleon, which is the route that he traveled towards the Alps in 1815, and he stayed here overnight. This is the old chapel that was built about 1715. Tagenal Tower, which is part of the old fortifications of this town. The tourist center, it's quite pretty, and it all centers around the fountain in the middle of this small square. The scenery so far has been quite spectacular. Example of a mountain that surrounded Castellani is in. You can't see the old town, but you can see that huge rock with the chapel right on top. This valley. The higher up as we twist and turn our way, down there is the lake, which is supposed to be very, very pretty, but which we could not visit. And now coming back around, you can get a 360-degree view of what this area looks like. It's really quite spectacular, with the roads switching back and forward as we climb through the mountains. Yeah, Digne, continuing on our route of the Napoleon Way towards Switzerland. It's Saturday, May 31st, and it's obviously a fair day in the town. The main street has a better picture right inside the town center, where you can see some of the shops and the crowds of people that are here for the Saturday afternoon fair.